The world was in chaos. It all started with the appearance of strange crystals and rocks that seemed to infect anyone who came into contact with them. At first, people thought it was just a strange phenomenon, but it soon became clear that this was the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. I was part of a group of survivors, led by a man named Jack. We had all banded together in the face of this new threat, trying to find a safe place to wait out the chaos. But as we traveled, we encountered more and more infected, making our journey more dangerous with each passing day. Jack was a natural leader, always calm and collected even in the face of danger. He had a plan and we trusted him to keep us safe. But even he couldn't have predicted what would happen next. As we were walking through a deserted town, we stumbled upon a group of survivors who had barricaded themselves inside a building. They were led by a woman named Sarah, who was just as strong and determined as Jack. After a tense standoff, we decided to join forces with Sarah's group. We needed all the help we could get in this new world. And as we got to know each other, we realized that we made a great team. Sarah's group had skills that complemented ours, and together we were able to scavenge for supplies and defend ourselves against the infected. As we traveled together, we encountered more survivors and added them to our group. There was Mark, a former firefighter who knew how to handle a gun, Maria, a nurse who could patch us up when we got injured, and Josh, a mechanic who could fix any vehicle we came across. We all had our own stories and reasons for surviving. Some of us had lost our families to the infected, while others had been on their own since the beginning. But together, we formed a new family, united by the common goal of staying alive. As we traveled, we encountered more and more challenges. The infected seemed to be adapting, becoming smarter and more aggressive. We had to constantly be on guard, ready to defend ourselves at a moment's notice. But amidst the chaos and danger, we found moments of joy and laughter. We shared stories and memories, finding comfort in each other's company. It was these moments that kept us going, pushing us to keep fighting for survival. One day, as we were traveling through the countryside, we stumbled upon a seemingly abandoned farm. But as we approached, we heard a voice calling out for help. We cautiously entered the farm and found a young girl named Lily, who had been hiding from the infected. Lily had been on her own for weeks, surviving off of whatever she could scavenge. She was scared and alone, but we took her in and made her a part of our group. And in return, she brought a sense of hope and innocence to our ragtag group of survivors. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, we continued to travel, always on the lookout for a safe haven. And then, one day, we found it. A group of scientists had been working on a cure for the infection, and they had found a way to reverse the effects of the crystals and rocks. We were hesitant at first, but after seeing the results of their experiments, we knew we had to take the chance. We said goodbye to our makeshift family, knowing that we were all heading towards a new beginning. And as we received the cure and watched the infected turn back into their human selves, we knew that we had survived the apocalypse together. In the end, it wasn't the crystals or the infected that defined our story. It was the bonds we formed with each other, the strength and resilience we found in ourselves, and the hope that kept us going. And as we looked towards the future, we knew that we could face anything as long as we had each other. The once peaceful wasteland of the Fallout universe had become a battleground, torn apart by a war between the survivors and the raiders. What had started as small skirmishes and raids had now escalated into a full-blown war, with both sides fighting for control over the limited resources and land left in the wake of the nuclear apocalypse. The survivors, a group of people who had managed to survive the initial devastation and rebuild their lives, were determined to protect what was left of their world. They had formed small communities and settlements, working together to create a sense of normalcy in the chaotic wasteland. The raiders, on the other hand, were a ruthless group of individuals who had no qualms about taking what they wanted by force. They roamed the wasteland, pillaging and terrorizing the survivors, leaving destruction and death in their wake. Tensions between the two groups had been building for months, with each side blaming the other for the scarcity of resources. The survivors accused the raiders of hoarding supplies and attacking their settlements, while the raiders claimed that the survivors were weak and didn't deserve to survive in this new world. But the breaking point came when the raiders launched a surprise attack on one of the largest survivor settlements, killing dozens and leaving the rest to flee for their lives. The survivors, fueled by rage and a desire for revenge, banded together and declared war on the raiders. The wasteland was now divided into two factions, with each side determined to eliminate the other. Both sides had their own advantages. The survivors had the numbers and the organization, while the raiders were more skilled in combat and had a deep understanding of the harsh wasteland. The war raged on for weeks, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The once barren wasteland was now littered with the bodies of the fallen, and the air was thick with the stench of death and destruction. As the war continued, both sides began to resort to more extreme measures. The survivors, desperate to gain an advantage, started using traps and ambushes to take out raider camps. The raiders, not to be outdone, resorted to using radiation and chemical weapons to drive the survivors out of their settlements. With each passing day, the war grew more brutal and merciless. The survivors and raiders had become so consumed by their hatred for each other that they had forgotten what they were fighting for in the first place. But as the war raged on, the wasteland started to suffer. The once fertile land was now barren, the water was contaminated, and the few remaining resources were quickly diminishing. Both sides had become so focused on destroying each other that they had neglected to see the bigger picture, that they were destroying their world in the process. In the midst of the chaos, a small group of survivors and raiders came together, realizing that they were all fighting for the same thing: survival. They saw the devastation and destruction their war had caused and knew that it had to end. This group of survivors and raiders formed an unlikely alliance, putting aside their differences and working together to find a peaceful solution. They convinced their respective leaders to lay down their weapons and come to the negotiating table. After weeks of intense discussions, a peace treaty was finally signed. The survivors and raiders agreed to put an end to the war and work towards rebuilding their world together. It wasn't an easy road, as there were still deep-rooted animosities between the two groups. But with time and effort, the survivors and raiders were able to coexist and even thrive in the wasteland. They learned to share resources and work together for the greater good. The war had come to an end, but not without leaving a lasting impact on the wasteland. The survivors and raiders had lost many lives and had caused irreparable damage to their world. But through this war, they had also learned the value of cooperation and the importance of preserving what little was left. And as the wasteland slowly started to heal, the survivors and raiders promised to never forget the lessons they had learned and to never let their world fall into chaos again. The war may have been the end of their old world, but it was also the beginning of a new one where they could work together to build a better future. The sun beat down on the ruins of the nuclear reactor, casting an eerie glow on the desolate landscape. I, Leela May, stood at the entrance, my trusty rifle in my hands, as I surveyed the area. The once bustling facility now lay in ruins, the victim of a nuclear blast that had decimated the surrounding area. I adjusted my cowboy hat, the brim shielding my face from the scorching sun. I had been hired by a group of scavengers to explore the reactor and retrieve any salvageable materials. They had warned me that the place was infested, but I was not one to shy away from a challenge. As I cautiously made my way through the rubble, I couldn't help but talk to myself. It was a habit I had developed over years of exploring the wasteland. It helped to calm my nerves and gave me a sense of companionship. Well, ain't this just a lovely sight, I said to no one in particular. Looks like someone done had a party and forgot to clean up after themselves. I continued to make my way deeper into the facility, my eyes scanning for any signs of danger. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my boots crunching on the debris. As I turned a corner, I came face to face with a group of feral ghouls. My heart raced as I quickly raised my rifle and took aim. Well now, ain't y'all just the prettiest things I ever did see, I said with a smirk. But I ain't here for no tea party, so I suggest y'all mosey on out to here before I make ya. The ghouls hissed and lunged at me, but I was quick with my trigger finger. One by one, I took them down, their bodies falling to the ground with a sickening thud. I let out a sigh of relief as I checked my surroundings for any other threats. Satisfied that the area was clear, I continued on my journey. As I made my way through the reactor, I couldn't help but marvel at the technology that lay in ruin. It was a shame that it had been destroyed, but such was the way of the wasteland. I came across a room that seemed to be intact, the door still sealed shut. Curiosity getting the better of me, I picked the lock and stepped inside. What I saw took my breath away. The room was filled with untouched supplies, including canned food, clean water, and even some ammunition. I couldn't believe my luck. I quickly gathered as much as I could carry, knowing that this would be a huge score for the scavengers. As I made my way out of the room, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see a group of raiders, their weapons aimed at me. Well, what do we have here? The leader said with a wicked grin. Looks like we hit the jackpot, boys. I knew I was outnumbered and outgunned, but I refused to let them take what I had found. I raised my rifle and took aim, my southern drawl becoming more pronounced as adrenaline coursed through my veins. Now y'all listen here, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I ain't looking for no trouble, but I ain't backing down either. So I suggest y'all just turn around and walk away before things get ugly. The raiders laughed, thinking I was just a naive girl with a big mouth. But they quickly learned not to underestimate me. In a flurry of gunfire, I took down the raiders one by one. When the dust settled, I stood victorious, my heart racing and my hands shaking. Well, I'll be damned, I said with a chuckle. Looks like I ain't no damsel in distress after all. I gathered my loot and made my way out of the reactor, my heart full of pride and my pockets full of supplies. As I rode off into the sunset, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this wasteland wasn't so bad, after all. The sun was shining bright in the sky as the villagers of the main clan in the land of Clash of Clans went about their daily tasks. The farmers were tending to their crops, the builders were busy constructing new structures, and the warriors were training for their next battle. The village was peaceful and prosperous, but little did they know that danger was lurking just beyond their borders. Deep in the forests surrounding the village, the Goblin King was gathering his army. He had been watching the main clan for some time now, envious of their wealth and power. He wanted to claim their village as his own and expand his territory. The Goblin King was known for his cunning tactics and ruthless nature, and he was determined to conquer the main village and take all of their riches for himself. One day, as the villagers were going about their usual routines, a loud horn sounded from the edge of the forest. The villagers rushed to the walls of their village and peered out to see what was causing the commotion. To their horror, they saw the Goblin King and his massive army approaching their gates. The villagers quickly sprang into action, preparing for battle. The warriors armed themselves with their swords and shields, the archers took their positions on the walls, and the wizards readied their spells. The Goblin King's army consisted of goblins, giants, and even some dragons. The main village had never faced such a formidable opponent before. As the two armies clashed, the villagers fought with all their might. The archers sent arrows raining down on the goblins, while the wizards cast powerful spells that decimated the giants. The warriors engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the enemy, their swords clashing against the goblins' weapons. Despite their fierce determination, the main village was greatly outnumbered. The Goblin King's army seemed to be never-ending, and the villagers were starting to tire. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the villagers heard a loud roar and saw a giant dragon swoop down from the sky, breathing fire onto the goblin army. It was the main village's secret weapon, their own dragon, trained and tamed by the village's most skilled warriors. The dragon's fire destroyed a large portion of the goblin army, giving the villagers a much-needed advantage. The warriors fought with renewed vigor, knowing that their dragon was on their side. As the battle raged on, the Goblin King himself entered the fray. He was a massive creature, towering over the villagers. His strength and speed were unmatched, and he was able to take down many of the warriors with just one swing of his massive club. The village's leaders, the chief and the clan's elders, knew they had to come up with a plan to defeat the Goblin King. They called upon the village's best warriors, including the chief's own son, to take on the Goblin King in a one-on-one battle. The villagers held their breath as they watched the intense fight between the Goblin King and the village's champion. The two warriors were evenly matched, and the battle seemed to go on forever. But in the end, it was the main village's champion who emerged victorious, striking the final blow to the Goblin King and bringing him down for good. With their leader defeated, the Goblin army quickly dispersed, leaving the villagers victorious. The main village had won the battle, but the victory came at a great cost. Many of the villagers had been injured, and some had even lost their lives in the fight. The villagers held a solemn ceremony to honor their fallen comrades and celebrate their victory. The chief gave a speech thanking the warriors and the dragon for their bravery and sacrifice. He also announced that from that day on, the dragon would be known as the protector of the main village. The villagers rebuilt their walls and tended to their wounded, knowing that they had to be prepared for any future attacks from their enemies. But for now, they could rest easy, knowing that the Goblin King and his army were no longer a threat. From that day on, the main village was known as a place of great strength and courage. The villagers had proven that no matter how powerful their enemies may be, they would always stand together and defend their home. And the legend of the battle against the Goblin King would be told for generations to come, inspiring future warriors to fight for their village and protect it at all costs. The once peaceful villages of Clash of Clans were now overrun with chaos and destruction. A mysterious virus had spread throughout the land, turning villagers into mindless zombies. The once mighty clans were now reduced to mere survivors, struggling to stay alive in a world that seemed to have turned against them. The leaders of the clans gathered together to discuss their next course of action. They knew they had to find a way to stop the virus from spreading and save what was left of their villages. It was decided that a small group of warriors would be sent out to find a cure while the rest of the clan would fortify their village and defend against the zombie attacks. The chosen warriors were led by the brave and fearless knight, Sir Marcus. He was joined by his loyal companions the archer, Lady Amora, the wizard, Lord Aiden, and the barbarian, Grog. As they ventured out into the infected world, they encountered hordes of zombies at every turn. The once beautiful landscapes of Clash of Clans were now filled with blood and gore. The stench of death lingered in the air, and the ground was littered with the remains of those who had fallen to the virus. Despite the dangers, the group pressed on. They had to find a way to save their clans and bring an end to the apocalypse. After days of searching, they stumbled upon a hidden laboratory in the mountains. It was there that they met the only survivor of the virus, a brilliant scientist named Dr. Emily. Dr. Emily had been working on a cure for the virus before she was forced to flee her lab. She explained to the warriors that the virus was created by a rival clan in an attempt to wipe out their enemies. However, the virus had mutated, and now it was out of control. She handed them a vial containing the antidote and instructed them to return to their village and distribute it to their people. Sir Marcus and his companions were overjoyed. They thanked Dr. Emily and made their way back to their village, fighting their way through the zombies. When they arrived, the clans were overjoyed to see them return safely. The warriors wasted no time and immediately started distributing the antidote to their people. Slowly, the villagers began to regain their senses and returned to their normal selves. But their joy was short-lived as they soon realized that the rival clan had not given up. They had launched a massive attack on their village, hoping to finish them off once and for all. Sir Marcus and his companions quickly rallied the villagers and led them into battle. The clash was fierce as the two clans fought for their survival. The zombies were still present, making the battle even more difficult. But with the antidote now in their possession, the villagers had regained their strength and fought with renewed determination. As the battle raged on, Sir Marcus and his companions made their way to the rival clan's base. They knew that in order to end the apocalypse, they had to put an end to the source of the virus. The four warriors fought their way through the enemy defenses, with Sir Marcus leading the charge. Lady Amora's arrows were swift and deadly, while Lord Aiden's spells provided much-needed cover. Grog's brute strength and battle cries struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. Finally, they reached the heart of the enemy base where they found the leader of the rival clan, a powerful sorcerer named Malakar. He had been the one to create the virus and unleash it upon the villages. A fierce battle broke out between Sir Marcus and Malakar. The two skilled warriors clashed in an epic fight, with neither one willing to give up. But in the end, it was Sir Marcus who emerged victorious. With a final blow, he defeated Malakar and put an end to the virus. The victory was celebrated throughout the villages. The zombie apocalypse was finally over, and the clans could now rebuild their villages and restore peace to the land. The four warriors were hailed as heroes and were honored by their clans. As they looked out at the once again peaceful and thriving village, Sir Marcus and his companions knew that they had truly saved their clans. They had proven that even in the face of a zombie apocalypse, the clans of Clash of Clans would never back down and would always fight for what was right.